Hello, and welcome to Undertale tutorial on how to use the Undertale Overworld engine version 2. This will be a quick tutorial and a quick breakdown on how to use the engine. So whenever we enter the project, we'll be greeted by the default room. We can move around and interact. But we want to set things up, so let's do it right now. Let's start off by modifying the room. If we head over to the object sprite, we can see a bunch of blocks here. All of these blocks are defining each room, what objects to be created, and what things should be appearing. So if you remove these, for example, and click the green flag, the room glows black. That's because all of the objects to make a room are now gone. So these are basically our control blocks, so if you want to add something in, it will work. Now to create something, we drag a block and create the costume. The costume name is case sensitive, so if we head over to the costumes, we can pick any costume from this category 1. For this case, let's pick hallway 1. Now if you click the green flag, nothing appears. That's because the size has to be defined, otherwise it will be blank. So let's give it a size of 150. Now it appears, but it's overlaying our character, which is something we don't want to do. There's a full manual above on what each function does. We're gonna head over here and type true. Now our hallway is a background, meaning it will never overlay with our sprite. Now let's add more things. Simply to add more new costumes, we simply repeat the process by dragging the create block. But this will be pretty annoying because we need to know the exact location of sprites, and we don't want to constantly click the green flag over and over. So if you head over to the variables, let's toggle editor mode. Now if you toggle the editor mode, we'll see everything. We'll see the waypoints and the collision. These waypoints are something that allows us to do things within the room. So if we enter this waypoint, for example, we'll change room. And this waypoint will create a mirror effect. So to understand how waypoints, we have to simply go to the S player sprite. If you head over here, these are our waypoints, and how to use them are fully defined right here. So this is where a waypoint should be created at. This also helps us to indicate where it should be. So let's find the waypoint 17. This is the waypoint 17. It's designed to only appear for room number 1, its ID is 17, and its interaction is in, for short interaction. So whenever we interact with it by pressing these, it gives us a message. Now, to modify this message, we have to go to the interaction section and then find an ID by the name of 17. And there we have it. Here we can write. Now if we click these, we can simply modify it. Now if you go back here again, we can see there's another interesting waypoint. This is waypoint that controls room. For example, this waypoint right here will send us to room number 7. And we can also tell us by here, this will be the next room by the name of room number 7. And this is room number 7. And if we go back here, we'll be sent back to room number 1. And in order for this to happen here, we have to find room number 7. And then we find which room controls. So this block right here will send us to room number 1. We can obviously modify which room we want to go. For example, we can make this send us to room number 9. Obviously we're stuck. But we can press T to escape the horrors. Another waypoint is a mirror, which basically allows us to reflect. If we turn off the editor, this is how it looks like. The mirror can be controlled by this block. There are two types of mirror, the reflection one and the ground one. So if we set this one to the reflection one, this is how it will look like. It will act like there's a giant mirror, but since we want it to reflect right beneath us, we're going to set it to mirror number 1. And also modifies and tells us the exact value. Another waypoint is water, so basically if we enter it, our sprite will basically go into the water. And we can see that and add it anywhere we want. There are actually trigger waypoints, so if we come over here, we see a trigger. Now obviously it's not visible to us, but in the editor mode we can see it. If we enter this trigger mode, it'll start running an interaction scene. This was trigger number 9. So if we head over here, we set this trigger to false, meaning it'll never appear again. We run a camera animation. And there, the trigger is gone, we ran our sequence. To add waypoints, we simply drag the waypoint block and then start modifying it. For example, we're in room number 1, so we want our waypoint to work exactly for this room. Now let's say we want right here to trigger an event. So our X is 83, our Y is negative 140, and we want the waypoint to go to this. So now we have a waypoint. Obviously it's not defined, so it will give us an error. So let's define this waypoint as trigger. Now this is a trigger waypoint. It still does nothing because we have not defined it. So let's define the trigger number. So now anytime we enter this, it will trigger number ID 20. But obviously, if there's another ID that uses this message, like this one right here, they'll share the exact same message. But let's make a whole new message, so let's just call it 30 for now. Nothing happens. So if we go to the interaction section, you're gonna copy and paste. Now, we want the message to say, test. Now, we're stuck in this mode forever because, obviously, there's no way to move our player back. Now, to make sure the player doesn't get constantly stun locked forever, we have to add a special block. We call it define number 8. This basically controls our player's Y movement. Now, obviously, we want it to look more realistic, so our approach is around 1 -45. So that looks like it's pushing us back, thanks to this block. Obviously, if you do it from this angle, it's not going to work properly. That's why you have to use multiple waypoints, and of course, multiple finding ways. But for now, we're going to leave it like that. So how does a room waypoint work? This waypoint is right here. This one. It's this block right here. Whenever we enter it, our player will spawn at -50, then get to 570, and Y30, and they'll face a specific direction. So for example, if we modify this to 400, and let's say 10, and looking up, this is what's going to look like. Our player is looking upwards at this direction. Now obviously that's a big offset, so if we undo this, it returns back to normal. To place an object, we can focus on this given information. For example, we want something here, so we're going to define 33 and 24 as something. Let's say we want a Mettaton statue. Now there's 2 statues, but I'll explain in a moment. Let's say let's just copy this one for now. And let's click. Nothing is happening. That's because our size of the object is not defined, which means it will never show. So let's give it a property of 50. You can actually press R instead of green flag. And there's our Mettaton statue. It's obviously kind of too small, so let's make it bigger. Not big enough. Perfect. No, I'm just kidding. So now we have a Mettaton statue. Now, we can also offset the depth factor. If we head over right here, we can offset the layer. Let's say we want to offset it by 50. We have to enter editor mode again and press refresh. Now, the Mettaton statue looks like it's a background. But what we really did was made the layer offset by 50. If we do it, we did make it -50, but if we do it by 50, and refresh, the statue has now more depths into it. This allows us to modify specific sprites to match the layering. So let's have the statue have an animation. So in order to make animation run, we head over to this section. This right here will be our animation speed. This will be animation offset. For now we don't need to use this. So let's give our statue speed of 3. Enter editor mode and press R. You're getting an error message. That's because the engine is trying to run the statue's animation, but nothing is happening. The engine doesn't know that there are 2 Mettaton statues. That's because we have to not include the 2 or 1 factor. This one. So we have to go back here and remove the 1. Now if we refresh, the statue is back and it's animated. Now we don't see anything, that's because the animation is moving way too fast. So if we set it to like 0.5 and refresh it, you can see the statue actually having animation running around. So obviously let's set the proper offset, click editor mode again, refresh, and there we have it. Obviously full screen this is more fixed. Now let's say we want to modify the room's collision. All we have to do is head over here, head over to costumes, and we have to find costume accordingly to the room ID. So room number 1 will give us this. Will give us this costume. So if we remove everything from here, the collision is completely removed. Now obviously we want to add some kind of collision. Now we have collision properly here. Now if we go here, there's a collision. Let's turn off music. We can also control music. So now no music will play at all. And to make sure we spawn properly below, not somewhere above, we're gonna head over to the player sprite. We're gonna head over right here. Enter editor mode. We're gonna send our very spawn point right here. Let's face right. So now every time we start the game, we'll always start right here. In order to make the room larger, we simply have to modify this value. Let's make our room 900. Now you can see the camera is expanding further down to the void. Now obviously nothing is currently present aside from the previous assets. So let's expand our room even more. We're gonna add another hallway sprite, but this time with the name of 2. It's obviously overlapping, so we're gonna add an offset of to negative 600. So we head over back to the object section, and there's our room. Now obviously there's clearly a gap, so let's fix it. Now the 2 costumes are perfectly aligned. And also we got our statue. Let's say we want to add pillars, the same one we see in the Sans corridor. To do that, we yet again have to create a new costume. Let's copy and paste this real quick, and let's call it pillar. Now the pillar is getting narrowed. That's because we have not removed it from animation, so make sure it's not inside an animation mode. So now we have a pillar, but the character is overlapping it, and we don't want that to happen. So to do that, we simply have to add a huge offset to it, 2000. So now the pillar will always remain on the front, but editor mode still allows us to see through it. But the pillar is not moving like an Undertale, it's remaining still. We want it to move around. So if you head over here, we can see this block right here. This is the depth factor. Essentially, if you put in a value right here, let's say 1.5, and refresh, we'll see that the pillar is now slowly moving. So if we move it somewhere inside hundreds or negative 100, we can see this effect even more clearly now. Now this offset can even be larger. Set 2. If you set it to, for example, 2, and start playing, we can see the effect way better. But if we set it to 0.2, then the pillar will be moving extremely slow. This is to create objects from the far away distance. So basically, the lower the value is, the farther away the object has to be. And the higher the value is, the closer it should be. Let's assume we want to have a waterfall falling right here. We're going to add another costume. We're going to call it waterfall. We're going to set it for now at 0. And we're going to set it around 350. So if you press play, we'll see our waterfall. Now, nothing is happening. It's not moving or animated. But let's give it the parallax scrolling again. Now it bows along with the pillar, starts moving smoothly. Let's give it a value of 1.5 and let's move it around to the middle section. So now we have a waterfall, but it's not moving. We could make an animation, but that's going to be very space consuming. So instead what we're going to do is head over here. This is a mod factor. Basically it allows us to loop an object. So for example, 5 and negative 1. The waterfall starts moving. Basically after 5 times, it's going to loop back where it used to be. We can use this to our advantage and make a loop. So already down here I did it before. So if you set it to 40 and start playing, you can see the waterfall looping, but we want it to be faster. You can see an offset, nasty offset here. That's because we have to make it off camera. And to do that, we're going to set it slightly higher. And there. Now it looks like the waterfall is actually flowing, but in reality, it's not. We can actually see this by setting it smaller size. Now we can see it perfectly looping, creating an illusion as if the waterfall is flowing down or is an animation. Now obviously we also want the waterfall to be way ahead of us. So we're going to also give it a layer offset of 2000. And now the waterfall is ahead of us. Now for the final example, let's add a costume. And let's have it to be a save star. I'm going to head over to costumes and call it save. Now again, removing 1 to make the animation working. I'm going to set speed to 0.2. We're going to set it around the waterfall place. We're going to make it a big star. So if you refresh it, we got our star right here. Obviously it's a bit too high, so let's set it slower. So we have our star right here. It doesn't have a collision by default, so if we ever want to do collision, we have to head over here and add collision. Now we have a collision system working for our star, but also depths. So let's remove the collision for now. We have a different purpose. So let's say we want to control this object right here. We can actually head over right here and call this object ID, let's just say 20. Now, if you head over to the clone section, so let's add an if statement. Now, to control ID, we have to simply go to our list and type item 21. So currently we want to control item ID 20. So let's make it whenever it's going to say hello. So now this object right here will always say hello. Let's say we want to do something more interesting. Let's say if we're touching the player, it just simply moves randomly. So basically this allows us to control the objects separately. We don't have to define them by costume, but you can do it by costume, but overall you can set an ID and control them however you want. I hope this tutorial was helpful because it should give you the basics on how to create your own overworld. Again, this is supposed to be used for simple purposes, nothing complex. I'll be creating in the future a more complex engine that will support heavy game development overworld, but for now this is for simple purposes. Thank you for watching this tutorial.